Good morning everyone. I'm going to be working on this bird image here from Pexels, royalty free. Link as always is attached to the link below, and I'm going to be showing you how to draw it very realistically in pencil. Now before I get into the pencil work and how to deal with that, we've got to get the main structure of the bird down onto the paper. I thought for a change I'll show you two different ways of doing this, just so that you can get a feel for it and it gives you some options. For these examples I'm using a very soft pencil and very smooth just printer's paper because I'm going to be kind of messing about with it, and you'll see what I mean. If you're doing this for real, you should be working in a HB pencil on a nice good quality drawing paper, like maybe a cartridge 140 GSM, okay? So keep that in mind. When I go on to do the proper drawing, you'll see me change papers. Now this is just an A4 sheet because drawing is incredibly intense with the amount of hours required, especially if you're trying to do something realistic, so I've kept it small. Big pictures look great, don't get me wrong, but you know, it's about time. So first of all, the first one I want to show you is basically boosting your hand and eye coordination. It depends on how good your hand and eye coordination is. Mine's pretty good because I draw a lot. You may find that this isn't the easiest technique for you, but give it a go. The more you do it, the better you'll get. You'll usually find if you're doing a lot of life drawing, this technique flows quite naturally after a while. It's quick and accurate. So I've got a pencil and I'm holding it towards the end, okay? And I'm keeping my eye on the reference image. Now to me, I'm looking first of all for the biggest area of mass, which is going to be this body section here, as you can see. I'm going to start getting that in, and I'm looking at getting the placement and the angle correct on the piece of paper while keeping my eye on the reference image. I need enough room for the head above and the tail below. Now if I look at the body and the tail and the body are roughly the same length. So holding that pencil, I'm going to start. Can you see those kind of, I'm going darker than you should be going. I'm getting that basic shape and I'm being really scratchy and really messy in my drawing. Then I'm going to get that head around here, okay, and I got my beak, and the beak flows through the eye. So we're looking at getting that angle. If you wanted to, you could put your pencil on there to get a feel for the angle. You'll find that if you feel angles, you're more accurate at your drawing. So by lining your pencil up and holding it carefully on one end, you can feel the angle and you'll be able to feel if your angle is correct. So I'm getting this bird in like that, and I'm keeping my eye on the bird so much more than my own piece of paper. The general rule when drawing should be 70% on the reference image and only 30% glancing on the drawing itself. So let's get that sticking. We're going to have the leg coming down low, and we've got the other stick coming up here. Now it's really messy, and that's normal for this. Next thing, because I've got the main structure in and I'm quite happy where it's sitting on the piece of paper, is to look at putting anything else in that's important. Now to me, these wing feather patterns are going to be quite important, and it lets me see how much space I've got between the top of the shoulders and the wings, okay? And I'm making loads of mistakes, and that's the nature of the drawing. You're making mistakes, you're just getting a feel for it, you're looking at where things are going, you're looking at any patterns that might be happening, and the more that you can get down, so you can see I'm working on the head here, the more I can see if I've got enough size to relate one thing to another. Okay, and I'm looking at his beak, and that should be coming up where that body bows around. Okay, so he is really scratchy, okay, in the kind of type of pencil lines I've made. Then I'm going to slide my hand down and I'm going to start refining it. I'm also looking for other things. So for here, I can see how the wing, you can see the bone coming up here, and you can also see the bones just coming in and down for the main wing that's tucked around him. That's going to come down here. Then I've got another wing coming in here, and I get a little bit of curve, and I get another bit of curve, and I'm starting to break down that area within that section. Still not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better and a lot more refined than those are. Now, a lot of students that are learning find this quite difficult because you have multiple lines and you have to be deciding on which line you want to be keeping and which line you want to get rid of. Normally, the more lines you've got, the worse that decision is because the more you have to think. Let's get that in there. So I've got also that wing coming in over here, and there's like 2 feathers. One sitting over there, and one sitting over there. They're coming up and around. And there's some feathers just tucking around there. So you can hear me thinking through the process of my drawing. And then I've got a little bit of fluffy lower stomach section coming out there. I've got some lines giving me an idea of where the feathers are and how big the feathers are. And the trick with really accurate drawing is to never be afraid of correcting errors. You'll get a much more realistic result. If you're fearless, make errors, just fix them. It's only a drawing, it's not that important. I'm going to bring that down here. Into the tail section, and that's coming up. I'm getting that lump from the bone coming in there, and then I've got that neck, which is this lovely curve, a bit zigzaggy. Comes up here, I've got neck going in there, and then the head. Usually the problem with students and birds' heads is they make them very round. They're actually quite flat at the top of the skull. And let's get that tucked in there. The other thing, a lot of students will make the beak way too big. Okay, let's get the pattern in. See how I'm moving the eye? I wasn't happy, I'm changing it. That's a sign of getting a much more accurate and refined drawing. Now I'm shaping it up. I've got that curve, which is going to go around the eye. Some of it's going to be a bit black, some of it's going to be a bit white. And got that leg in. The trick with legs, always with birds, to look at this negative space. So I'm looking at that wing. Can you see that's coming down? That is lower than that. Now mine is the same. That means I'm wrong. I need to be bringing that far lower down there. Now by bringing that far lower, that means I've got to change this angle on the leg. I'm looking at that triangular area in here and bringing that down there. And can you see he's basically there, or she? I have no idea how you can tell with these birds. It's just so pretty a picture, I thought we'd give it a go. And so that's one way of drawing, if you want to have a go at that. The other way of doing it, which is much more traditional, is to break down the reference image into simple shapes. So let's get that tape off and bring that on down here and here. Okay, so the other way of drawing, which is quite popular, is to, again, you're building up with shapes, okay, but you're trying to get things much more accurate. I'm holding the end of the pencil is at quite a low angle. Can you see I'm not perpendicular, I'm down low, and I'm going to get the curvation of that body, so it's more like an oval. Okay, then I've got a triangle coming in over here. Okay. I'm trying to be accurate with my lines. Then I've got a triangle sitting in here, and like an oval shape around here, which I'm going to join up for the neck. Okay, that might move. I think that actually does have to move over. So even with this, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to fix things. The nature of drawing. And then we get a triangle B. Okay, very simple. So if I go over that with my pencil, so you can see my basic decision approach. I then got my bits of branch. Now, when you're doing this, you would obviously be a bit more accurate than I am. I'm being quite frivolous and quick. You can see there how simple my bird is. Now from this, she says, you start working up the detail. So let's have a look. Let's get these wings in here. I'm going to drop that down. And you'll find that it's easy to be drawing in straight lines and curves. You usually get a much more accurate breakdown of things. Then you can see how I'm bringing up the tail. I've decided that that actually needs to come over here. And then I'm going to get that coming down here. So let's get the main structure, and that's got a basic wing shapes. I'm trying to look at being in there. I still think that might need to come up even higher, to be quite honest. But we'll play around with it. So just lay my hand down the pencil, as you can see I've started to do. Then pull in the basic shapes. And by having your hand down this pencil like this, you'll find that you'll naturally create much more smoother arches. For some students like this, some students hate this. It's really, personal preference. Personally, you have to try a few and see what works for you. Because there is no perfect recipe for everyone. It's usually so easy to get the eye position wrong, but so be fluid with that. With this you can double check, because you've got to have that black fitting in there, so you'll know if you're going wrong. You should also be rubbing out any errors as you go along, so you can see all these guidelines. These would be getting removed, and keeping your drawing nice and clean. And there you go. Now that's a very simple bird. From there you would work up more and more detail, getting it nice and accurate. Once you've got that, then we can start doing the drawing. So let's move on to that, shall we? Right, so this is my drawing on a piece of cartridge paper. I've used a HB pencil to create the drawing, and you can see that I've got all these different lines, the construction lines for working everything out, because I'm much more of an intuitive drawer, like that first example. Now, when you're doing that type of drawing, you should, as you're going along, get rid of all your guidelines and your error marks. But because I was trying to do it so quickly, I didn't really have time to do that, so they're a little bit kind of messed all into the picture. So I'm gonna grab this rubber, go around them, clean up my picture. If you're ever doing pencil work and you want it to be accurate, you need to have a very crisp linear drawing with no marks, no guidelines. It's just an accurate observational drawing, and then that means that we can start shading into it. Okay, here we go. This is what you're looking at ending up with. Sorry, I'm losing my voice there. You can see here I've gone round with my HB pencil. I'm just drawing a standard Staedtler HB Norris drawing pencil, which I quite like. Some people will find a Faber-Castell HB is better. Others will like a Derwent. It's, again, just like I said at that beginning with learning to draw, you need to try a few ones and see what works for you. Now then, once I've done that, just to tidy up some of my drawing lines, I've got a Mono Zero eraser, which is incredibly handy to have if you like pencil drawing. Pencil drawing and Mono Zeros are great recipe together, so I would recommend getting one of those. Right, so let's talk about graphite grades. If you look at a pencil that you buy in an art shop or generally around, you'll see that on the pencil, hopefully that's getting some focus, you've got a HB marking. Now the HB is about the mixture of graphite to binder in the pencil lead. The HB is part of a grade of graphite in a pencil lead, and it's something you really need to know about for drawing. So, if we look at it in this way, it's usually easier. If you think that a HB is your Goldilocks pencil, okay? It's not too hard and it's not too soft. It just gives you a perfectly grey mark, and it's good for drawing. Then, if we look at the B pencils, so if we go for a B, then you'll find you get a 2B, then you'll get a 3B, and that goes all the way up to generally a 9B. There'll probably be some smart Alex that's got a 10B somewhere, but you know what I mean. Now with B pencils, you've got more graphite in the pencil than you have binder. That means that the B pencils will be much darker, or the lines that you can get will go towards the darker spectrum, okay? The higher the number, the darker the pencil will go. But because you've got the higher amount of graphite in it, you'll find that you'll apply pressure and it will wear down quite quickly. So it's hard to get a very fine line. A lot of B pencils, like a 9B, you're going to get through your pencil really quickly. You'll constantly be sharpening it to keep it to a point, because that's what you want for accurate drawing. And before you know it, you'll have a pencil that's about 1 inch long. That's normal, okay? So just think about that with the Bs. Then the other direction you can go is your H pencils, okay? So you've got a H there, you've got a 2H, and you've got a 3H. And again, they run to your 9Hs, okay? Now these are not as dark as these. These are about giving you a very fine line. Okay, because they've got more of the binder than the graphite in the pencil, when you sharpen it, it's going to stay sharp for much longer and allow you to have a very fine line. Don't get me wrong, they can go dark. They will be darker in a HB if you apply enough pressure, but they'll also keep their shape that you sharpen the pencil to, where a B pencil will get blunt quite quickly. Now a lot of students prefer using Bs to Hs. A lot of the time, the best way is to do your shading in the Bs. A H can be handy in shading. It depends on what type of surface texture you're trying to shade. They're particularly good for hair though, if you're working on portraits, because you can get the very fine long lines that represent hair. So HB is where you should start. Okay, so that's your starting pencil. You should be drawing in that pencil, and you should be starting to build up your shading in that pencil. It'll stop you from going too dark, it'll give you some nice soft tones, and it'll allow you build up the control on the pencil so that you can get from light to dark on the paper and make that realistic illusion of form and shape and depth. Now, if you're new to this, a really handy project is to take some eggs. If you get an egg and sit it down in front of you, then light it from an angle. So if you take that, I'm using my imagination here, so your egg's going to be much better than my egg. Say I've got my light source coming from here. Okay, that means that obviously down here I'm going to see a lot of shadow. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Good. I'm going to rub out that line in there. You also want your line to be nice and crisp to be able to shade into. So, knowing that this is dark, this is light, and that my egg is curved, I need to shade around. So if I take my HB pencil and I start shading it around here, and then I have to control the pressure that I'm applying on the pencil while keeping the curve, so that the pencil just glides over the paper and gets softer and softer. Now I might want to come back and just blend that darker tone into my softer tone, but the idea is that you get to the white of the paper, which is going to be the highlight on the egg that you can see in front of you. And if I do a little bit of this, you'll see what I mean. Now the other thing this is showing you is something called stealing a line. Can you see how the construction line around the edge down here has vanished into my shading? Again, it'll give the illusion of the depth. Sorry, I'm concentrating on drawing and not on talking. It's hard to do both at the same time. You should, if you're really good at this, and it requires practice, and eggs are really good at giving you this practice, get something that looks very three-dimensional. And you should be doing it just with a HB pencil. Be amazed at what you can do with a HB pencil when you get really skilled at controlling it. Can you see that starting to look three-dimensional down the bottom? Now the other thing is I'm going to be aware of the shadow that's coming in. So I'm going to press really hard with my HB and start working out a little bit of shadow just around the bottom. And you can see how all my construction lines down this all vanished. And I'm kind of guessing shadow shape. This is just a quick idea of how this works. Good drawing, your pencil should always be sharp. Mine's getting way too blunt. If I sharpen mine, you will see that I will be able to push it even harder on those darker tones. And this is just using your HB pencil. Don't need anything flashy. See how dark I can get that HB. Now a normal B will go darker than this, so that's why I always recommend that students learn to use a HB, because you'll get the pressure control before you go into using a normal B. Okay, right, so I would recommend before you do the bird, if you're new to drawing, to get some eggs out of your fridge, get a piece of paper, stick them somewhere where you've got a light source and do a few drawings to get a feel for it. I also recommend that you don't start working through all these grades of pencil. You should be looking at jumping every few, otherwise you're going to go mad. So I'm going to start off the drawing with HB, I'm going to do some shading with HB, then I'll probably move into like a 2B, then after I've done some 2B I'll mix into some, maybe a 6B. You know, I can jump every few. You do not have to go up in numerical order. Then towards the end of the drawing, I'll usually use a H, just to tidy up some odd areas of detail and make sure the fine lines are correct. So let's go on to do that now, shall we? Okay, so I've got a nice sharpened pencil. It's just a HB, and I'm going to start looking at planning out my shading. Now when you're shading with pencil, your hand is quite warm. You will find that you rub off. So you want to work up here and work down, and you also probably want a spare piece of paper to lean on. Like so. Doesn't need to be a massive, just something that you can put your hand on and stop you from smudging your work. Then you can start shading. Okay, so hold the pencil about halfway down, be gentle on it. It's better to be too soft and light at this stage, and then to gradually build up those darker tones as you work through. Your shading, because you're doing something like feathers or hair, so think about the type of mark that you're generating and the direction of your lines to represent those marks. You can see how I'm pushing down on the paper, then flicking up, okay? Just work that in there and there. And then that's going to come up to a point. So, can you see how it's wobbly along here? You might want to get your 1 and 0. Clean up a little bit more any earlier lines that are a little bit too straight. You might find that you want to, play around the beak a little bit. I'm just going to use the rubber to blend that in a little bit more. Create a little bit of a highlight. Right, so once you've done that with like the HB across the artwork, then you start working up through your beads. So I'm just looking at my B numbers that I have here in front of me. So that's a 4B I've got there. Okay, if you see this, alright, once I put that, can you see how dark that goes compared to the layer that I had before? And then everyone's like, well, why did you put the layer in before? Because first of all, you'll get this easier tone of graduation, which is what I wanted. And it does a lot of the thinking work for you. A lot of it gets into just looking at tone. So less work you've got to think about doing. You can see there, so I've done a HB, then I've gone up and done a 4B. You could do a 2B, it wouldn't do you any harm. And then you can jump up if you want to like a 6B. I've got an 8B, so let's grab an 8B, nice and sharp, and take this even darker. So you can see there how much stronger you get those tones. Let's bring a few flicks in that hair. Make sure your pencil's staying sharp. Okay. And then you can see how I was talking about then having a H to tidy up a few areas. So if I grab a H, now can you see how sharp that H is? It's a really good point. And for areas where you have really tight detail, such as white hair coming in to the beak like this, it's great. Gives you that lovely detail. Okay, so what I'd probably do, I've got my HB, I would shade out some background, and I'm going to be doing the whole bird in a minute, I'll show you what I mean, but if I just concentrate on this head section, you'll see results much quicker. So you can see how this is starting to come together. The thing that I just want to go over is finger smudging. Now anyone that I teach will know that I particularly hate finger smudging. It's a sign of poor pencil work. Okay, if you get your finger and have to rub it out, it's because you can't control the pencil toner accurately. You shouldn't be finger smudging. If you are going to smudge, which I personally don't like, grab a tissue and do it with a little bit of tissue. That way you'll stop the oils from your skin getting onto the paper and causing damage to the paper long term. It's not the best thing. You should be using the pencils to control the tone that you want to generate, okay? So try not to fall into that trap, because it's basically a bad practice that will limit the type of tones of grey you can generate within your work. It's all about achieving good pencil control and getting those tones to make it look accurate. Right, so I'm going to work through the picture now. See what you think. So can you see these cross hatching lines, because you've got all the feathers going over each other at different angles? I'm generating those and I'm building them up wherever I can see a little bit of the bone work sitting underneath the feathers. Then I can jump up and use my 6B or 4B, it's completely up to you, and I can build up a little bit more tone. Need to be really careful and make sure I keep this pencil sharp, or it's very easy to go mucky in your lines because you can't control how thin they are. Just go in here. so there you go, you should end up with something that looks like that. So let's just do a quick recap. First of all, you're looking at creating a crisp linear drawing of your animal. Once you've got that crisp linear drawing working in a HB pencil, because it's your Goldilocks pencil, not too hard and not too soft, you then go around it and you make sure that you've removed any marks that you don't want. So if you've got a crisp line, you can make that line disappear into the tonal work. Then you use your HB pencil to set the basic mid-tone grey, wherever you can see that in the area. Now some people like to work per an area, some people will work the whole picture in HB. Once you've done a HB, then you're going to push up towards your darker tones, and those are created by using your B pencils. You're going to start off in a sequential form. So you might jump to a 2B or a 3B, then you might jump to a 6B or a 7B, then you might finish off with a 9B. So you can jump every few, gradually increasing the number of the B. Once you've done that with the B's, then you'll probably want to come back and use a H to do some very fine detail work. Your H's will give you a dark line, but not as dark as your B's, and they will give you a very thin line. The B's will get thicker because it's a very soft lead, therefore it wears down quite quickly and becomes much more of a thicker line. You may constantly find that you need to use a small rubber to put your highlights back in. You should not be using your fingers to smudge any lines. You can see on this tutorial I've not used my fingers at all. I am looking at creating lots of different types of marks. Those marks should be representing the textures of the form that I'm drawing, so whether that be feathers or scales, it's completely up to you, and they should be wrapping around the contours of those forms. So for instance, these bird feathers are grabbing that way around the shape. Okay, here you can see them going that way around the shape. You need to be following the same approach. Once you've done that, then look at putting in your background so that you've got some contrast. Okay, you may find once you put the background in, like I have done here, that you want to then grab a darker pencil and just put in a few hits of a really strong dark here and there to exaggerate the tone and the contours that are happening on your creature. Now, the idea of pencil or any art form is that you can edit it and you can make it look better than real life. So, you know, don't be afraid to push your luck and go a little bit darker in a few places if you think that will add something special to the artwork. It's not a photograph, it's a drawing. The other thing you need to be looking at is keeping your tonal shading tight. Can you see here when I'm doing it? I'm trying to do it so that you completely cover the paper. The pencil lines are nice and tight together and you cannot see the paper coming through. If I want to highlight, then I will expand the gap between those pencil lines to give me the white of the paper for the highlights that I want to generate. It's always wise to have a break at the end and then to come back and see if there's certain places that you want to make darker. Just add the tonal change that you want to see across the whole images. You can get a bit of tunnel vision when working this close up on very fine work. Okay, now I've done a load of hard work for you, I'll have you know. It's your turn now. So you go and have a go, and practice makes perfect. You'll find your first ones go horribly wrong. Do not worry about that. Making errors is all part of the learning curve when getting better with drawing. Embrace your mistakes and learn from them. I'll see you next time. Bye everyone.